Man, a lot to cover. I honestly, because look, this entire channel could be devoted to this movie because from this movie really flows so much of our understanding of the lore of Twin Peaks. And there are podcasts that went on for years. I'm speaking of Twin Peaks Unwrapped, great podcast. And they could keep going. They could easily keep going. You could never fully mine the depths of this. So in order to keep this within some reasonable amount of space, I had to be selective about what I was going to talk about. Now, the rules that I engage in when interpreting will force me to limit myself. But the way Lynch does his work, you're invited to speculate. And everyone's speculation is legitimate, according to David Lynch, for the most part. He will draw the line in certain places. A lot of Lynch fans don't know that, but it's true. I remember when he was I may have spoke of this briefly in a previous video, but he one time was asked about The Straight Story by a reporter. And she said, oh, when Alvin's hat flies off his head and he goes to grab it, that was an homage to action movies, wasn't it? And Lynch said, no. He said, I had to get him off the lawnmower. There were other times with Mulholland Drive. He was asked, are you just trying to confuse people? And he says, no, there's a line of interpretation, but he also left it open. So one of the reasons actually Lost Highway is, although it's an enjoyable film to watch, it's not my favorite of Lynch's because any interpretation ends in a contradiction. And that's not true for most of Lynch's work. I think Lost Highway was a little too closed. All right, so there's just so much to say. If I kept these videos at 10 minutes, it'd be 15 parts. So I'm just going to try to keep it at about 20. And this film is famous for Quentin Tarantino's statements about it. I'm just going to paraphrase and say that Tarantino said that Lynch was being self-indulgent with this film. That's not exactly what he said. That's basically what he said. I agree with that. However, I think Tarantino's wrong that that makes it bad. I think it makes this movie amazing. Now, listen, I want to tell you, this movie's aged like a fine wine. It used to be, I used to watch this movie and just be embarrassed for David Lynch. I was like, what was he thinking? And he would say things like, you know, there are parts of that movie that I do like. Talking about Fire Walk With Me, it wasn't like Dune, where he didn't want to have anything to do with it anymore. You know, with Fire Walk With Me, he was like, you know, there are parts of that movie I really like, that I think are really good. He was right. There are parts of this movie that are really good. Really, really good. And again, today, movies are so poorly made. And they're so general, for such a general audience. I apologize. Whew, sorry about that. That they just don't have anything special about them. And it's just made this movie it's such of a one-of-a-kind film. Even among the pantheon of Lynch's work. In all of his works, somehow, this is probably his most unique. It's his most rare film. I don't know what to say about it. I'm at a loss for words. Fire Walk With Me is an enigma, as all of Lynch's work is. But man, it's a different kind of movie. So what I liked about Twin Peaks, and I apologize for the long intro here. I like to get straight to it, but there's some things I want to say about this because there's kind of a story on my channel here, how certain things have affected me over the course of my life. Not that you should care, but I mean, you're here. Maybe you would enjoy these stories, I hope. I loved my experience watching Twin Peaks more than I loved the story when I watched it. I experienced something. I could relate to what it was. I wanted to be in that town. I felt that it was remarkable that I could be given such an experience. And I was in Florida on a vacation when I finally watched Fire Walk With Me. And I just you know how it is. You finally get around to watching all the things that are out. And I remember going, what? This does not feel like Twin Peaks. And for years, what I didn't like about Fire Walk with Me is it just didn't feel like Twin Peaks. That was my issue with it. And now I have a different feeling about it. Now I think it's an essential film for understanding Twin Peaks. Now, I do want to say, as far as my rules go, when I say rules, this isn't a rule. I tend to not read what other people say about movies. I don't go to forums. I don't really, I don't read articles about them typically. I will listen to podcasts and watch videos. With this movie, though, it's been so long, in so many years. I've read the Wrapped in Plastic magazines, not all of them, but some of them. I've listened to so many podcasts, Now Playing Podcast, and I know Stuart's opinion and Arnie's opinion on this movie, and so it's almost impossible for me to say that all my ideas about Twin Peaks solely come from me and my experience watching this film. For all the rest of the previous videos, I've been able to really tell you, hey, I did read an article about that, or I did this. I couldn't tell you. I have no idea where I may have heard some things that I'm going to discuss. It's just been so long and so many years with talks with friends and trying to study David Lynch. I've just read a lot about David Lynch, and there's no way that I can say this is solely my thought. You know, some thoughts are new as I watched it this past time, for sure. I got some new insights that I think pretty legitimate. And I did scour forums a little bit on this one just to see, is anyone else talking about this? I haven't heard anyone, but again, over the years, I haven't sought out what anyone has said either, though, particularly about the movie and God analysis. I never really did that until this week watching this, because I wanted to see, there's so many fine details that I had to go on Reddit and ask about those details. I was like, does anyone know about this? And there's and that drug up a lot of theories and so forth. Very helpful community, the Twin Peaks community. So I was able to get some answers to some questions I had, because I was trying to do a little bit of theory crafting. Okay, so this is a long intro. I know I haven't even got into the meat and potatoes yet, and I apologize for that. I love to go straight into it, but I do think it's important you understand these things. This video is going to be different. This entire series will be a little different from all my analysis videos. I'm going to deal with some, what one might call tertiary issues. I'm going to analyze the film, part one, by dealing with the tertiary issue. And then I'm going to go into some hardcore analysis of the center of the film. And then I'm going to end in the last part of the series showing the difference between the official, quote unquote, ending of Fire Walk with Me and what happened to Laura Palmer unofficially, and what season 3 has to say about what actually happened. Now, that word official or unofficial comes from Philip Jeffries, the official version or unofficial version. If that's confusing, I apologize. I'll clear it up when I get to probably around the last part of these videos. I'm not sure how many parts this is going to be. Okay, so the first 30 minutes, best part of the movie, in my opinion, the best segment of Fire Walk with Me, in my opinion, is the Chet Desmond stuff. Now, there is a famous, debated theory about this section. And if you know anything about it, it's really interesting. A man named John Thorne has a theory that all of the Chet Desmond, the first 30 minutes of Twin Peaks, is actually Agent Cooper, and that is a dream. Now, I want to say first off, John Thorne was the editor, I believe, editor-in-chief of Wrapped in Plastic magazine. I don't think anyone is as big of an expert on Twin Peaks as John Thorne. This guy has forgotten more than I'll ever know. Additionally, my rules for interpreting Twin Peaks, John Thorne basically obeys. They're not my rules, by the way. They're basic hermeneutics, okay? He obeys those rules. He tries very hard with his theory to dig into Lynch's motivations. And he looks at Lynch's scripts and Bob Ingalls' scripts, and mines data to see if this theory about Agent Cooper dreaming Chet Desmond is true. My personal conclusion is that the idea that this is a dream of Agent Cooper's is false. I think it's a stretch. I think many in the Twin Peaks community actually agrees with me on this. This is not a slight on John Thorne. I think the guy's amazing, and I think that his theory is awesome. Brilliant. If you don't know anything about it, I think he wrote a book called, I forget the name. He was a contributor to a book called Blue Rose, or there's a Blue Rose magazine now that he's a part of. But you can find this theory. It is out there. It's easy to find because it's fairly famous. But I do think it's a stretch, and I have some reasons why I think it's a stretch. I will say this. The Missing Pieces, which is an hour and a half of clips that were edited out of Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me, I omit those. I don't consider those when I think about John Thorne's theories or my own. And the reason why is if you do that, all bets are off. Those were edited out for a reason. And any theory, in fact, all of season 3 of Twin Peaks is null and void if you take into account the edited material of the missing pieces, the edited out missing pieces, because it would redefine who Judy is. Okay, Judy, I guess you could find a way to make it all work, but I wouldn't be willing to stretch that far. So I don't consider the missing pieces. If you know what the missing pieces are, it's just for years, rumors about this footage that was part of Fire Walk with Me that was cut was out there somewhere. And they included it in the box set that I'm going to try to include on the thumbnail for this video. They're brilliant scenes. They're great, but they should not be considered canon, in my opinion. They were edited out for a reason. And again, they would completely upend John Thorne's theory for sure. And they would upend season 3 as well. So I just don't include them. So so Thorne's theory is this. Chet Desmond is doing the things Cooper did. This was Cooper's investigation of Teresa Banks. And Cooper is dreaming about it. And we're watching Cooper's dream. And he has several reasons for this. First off, he gives you some insights really interesting that there's a lot of duality going on. And he's right. There's 2 secretaries, one with blonde, one with black hair, doing the same job. Who's that? That's Laura, right? And Maggie Ferguson. A question, is you talking about that little girl that was murdered? Is asked exactly the same twice. There's a scene where Sam Stanley, played by Kiefer Sutherland, which was ingenious casting. If you told me you're getting Kiefer Sutherland to play Sam Stanley, I would have said you're nuts. Because Kiefer Sutherland's known for being kind of this hardcore, awesome hero, kind of an action or even evil sometimes. Sam Stanley's on the spectrum. And he plays him, he just shows you Sutherland's acting range. It's really, really good. But the thing is, okay, so he shows all this duality and he says, and he appeals to dream logic. I've read the article and I'm like, appealing to dream logic, all of Lynch's work has dream logic. That doesn't make this a dream. That's not enough. And he says that himself though. John Thorne says, well, when you look at the 2 women, okay, the 2 secretaries, that's a big point for him. It seems that it's telling you that things aren't what they seem. Kind of an interesting point. The only thing with that is that there's several reasons that I would have an issue with that. The Maggie Ferguson-Laura comparison it doesn't entirely hold water in my opinion. And the reason why is that is real. There's no reason for you to watch that and say things aren't what they seem. No, things are apparently what they seem. Maggie Ferguson is the cousin of Laura Palmer and looks like her. It doesn't indicate a dream at all. Duality, I wouldn't have any reason to really conclude that it points to this being a dream. I don't want to take Thorne. I might be apologize if I'm misrepresenting him in some way. I don't mean to be. I think that that's not entirely accurate. What he might be holding to there. Again, it's a theory, so that's the way it goes. It's legitimate. I'm not saying it's illegitimate. I'm just not personally buying it. If you buy it, by the way, I'm not criticizing you for it. I think, nor would Lynch. I think that it makes sense. It does. It makes sense. I just don't think it's there. The other thing is, when Cooper dreams in the series, it's clear he's dreaming. It's just so clear that he's dreaming. It's not, in fact, dreams are really important in Twin Peaks. And so when someone is dreaming, it's just said that they're dreaming or shown. It's never quite done this way. That doesn't mean it's wrong. I just think that it shows that I think I would expect, wouldn't have been hard to show Cooper dreaming. Okay, so that leaves us with the question, what is happening here then? If this is not Cooper dreaming, what is happening here? Well, I think that Chet Desmond was a real FBI agent that investigated the murder of Teresa Banks. I think it's real. And the other thing that John Thorne said that I just don't agree with is he talked about Blue Rose cases. And he says, Desmond says to Sam Stanley, in reference to the Blue Rose, I can't tell you about that. And John Thorne says, he doesn't say, I won't tell you about that. He says, I can't tell you about that. Well, the thing with that is that can't tell you about that can also mean won't tell you about that. It doesn't mean that he can't physically, that he is mentally unable to. He might be restrained by the fact that Blue Rose case is for the elite of the elite within the FBI, which I think is actually true. So when we get to my theory about what's happening here, what I think Lynch is trying to do is create a connection between Agent Cooper and Laura Palmer, a more direct connection, something that has to do with the third world. Real quick, let me just talk about that because that won't make sense if you haven't seen any of my other videos. So there's a first, a second, and third world. Not that Lynch has done that. This is the way I identify things in Twin Peaks. I created these categories to make it less confusing. So the first world, pardon me if you've already heard this, the first world is just the plain basic things you would expect every day. Walking around Twin Peaks, going to school. Bobby's on the practice, hasn't showed up for football practice. Sarah Palmer's calling around, trying to find out where Laura is. Just the normal everything day-to-day life things that happen. Then there's the second world. That's the seedy underbelly of Twin Peaks. That is One-Eyed Jacks. That is that Laura happens to go with random men as a prostitute regularly. That's part of her life. And that it's dragging her closer to this dark world. And what is that dark world? That dark world is the third world. That's the world of the Black Lodge. That's the manifestation of it at certain pinch points in the world, like Glastonbury Grove. I call them pinch points. I don't know what anyone else would call it, but places where the Black Lodge or that third world meets with the first world and second world. It just appears. There are several of these. And Jeffries got involved in all that. Okay, he got mixed up in that. Anyway, the point here that I'm trying to drive to is, so Lynch is trying to create a connection in the third world that is more direct between Cooper and Laura. All right, that's what's happening with the Chet Desmond stuff. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, as Desmond is going through and we're learning more about the Teresa Banks situation, what's going to eventually happen? Cooper's going to come in and follow up and try to figure out what happened to Chet Desmond. So here's what it basically boils down to. And this is really interesting, okay? Blue Rose cases are, Thorne is right about this, and I think the community knew this well before season 3, that a Blue Rose doesn't occur in nature. So it indicates an unnatural thing is occurring, a supernatural thing. And Project Blue Book is kind of related loosely to the Blue Rose case. We learned that in season 3. And so Director Cole has had several agents come up missing as a result of Blue Rose cases. Chet Desmond, Agent Cooper, Philip Jeffries, and the Air Force has had someone come up missing, and now his name is completely Major Briggs, right? Major Briggs has come up missing too. So agents that go out to investigate Blue Rose cases apparently don't come back. And we learned that in season 3, the penultimate episode. Cole sits down with Albert and says, there's something I've been keeping from you. But all of these agents have gone missing. And he tells Albert, I'm worried about you, because he's been protecting Albert. Okay. Because why? Everybody Cole sends out ends up disappearing. So what does Cole do in season 3? He takes a more hands-on approach, doesn't he? He goes out and investigates Blue Rose cases by himself now, because so many people have ended up missing as a result. He's got to figure this out on his own. And so there's, as I've mentioned, if you watch my other Twin Peaks videos, there's a line of narrative going on that's trying to show you that Cole is protecting Albert. He's very worried about Albert because he knows once Albert gets involved in Blue Rose, he's just going to disappear. And he doesn't want that to happen to him. So that's what's going on here. Is Chet Desmond we're seeing what happens to Cole's agents. And we're, through Chet Desmond, learning something about Philip Jeffries. We're learning that he also was sent out to deal with a Blue Rose case, and it didn't work out too well. Okay. So this video is now, I didn't get anywhere near where I wanted to get. So this is part 1. Like and subscribe. Have a good one.